So you had a near-death-like experience, not
Hmm.
near-death experience, but like experience. That's like a new expression for me lately. Would you like to share what that was about and what happened?
Yes, yes, I would love to. So earlier I mentioned that I had been raised in the Christian faith and that I didn't understand what my pre-birth memories were, and I spent my life just chasing supernatural experiences and trying to figure out how to connect with this divine bliss that I remembered. And so, from within the context of my Christian faith, the terminology that we would put on that would be experiencing God's presence. And so, I prayed every night when I went to bed to experience God's presence. And I knew that if I could have that experience, that all the pain and suffering of this earthly life would just be wiped away in an instant because I remembered what that felt like. And so for many years, I prayed this prayer and nothing happened. And I can't explain why something finally happened when it did, aside from the fact that I joke that maybe God just decided that I needed a little help to stay on track. Like, let's just give her a little glimpse of this so she can get focused back on what she's supposed to be doing. But anyway, whatever the reason, I was about 18 or 19 years old and I was laying in my bed. I was fully awake and my eyes were closed. And I was praying my usual prayer to experience God's presence. And suddenly I was in another reality. My experience breaks down into two phases. So, in the first phase, I still perceived myself to be in my body, in my bed, in my room, but it was like I was in another dimension because I felt as if I was floating in an ocean of love, and I felt waves of love washing over me from my feet up to my head, and they were washing over me and through me. And when they washed through me, I felt the same unconditional love and bliss and perfect peace from my pre-birth memories. And I felt as if I was floating in a force field of very intensely personal love. And I recognized this being of love as what I had been taught to call God in my earthly life. And I also recognized that I had known this being before my earthly life. And I said to it, kind of sarcastically and jokingly, I said, I've been looking for you my entire life, and you are finally here. Where have you been for my entire life? And I didn't really get an answer to that, but I just remember like floating in this force field of very powerful and personal love and feeling like I don't ever need to go back to my life on earth. I'll just stay here forever and I'll be perfectly happy. And it felt as if I was being held in my father's arms and nurtured in my mother's womb at the same time. I definitely experienced the masculine and the feminine sides of the divine. And I felt like, I remember thinking, this love is like all the loves that you could experience in the world: father, mother, sister, brother, parent, child, best friend, lover, pet, everything all rolled into one and multiplied by a million. And I just felt like I was falling back into the infinite heart of the universe. And I realized how what I had been taught in the church about how most people are going to be thrown into hell forever and be eternally lost, how silly and ridiculous that was in the face of this love that was the size of the multiverse, and every ounce of it was aware. There's absolutely no way that somebody could fall into the cracks and be forgotten. There's absolutely no way that anybody could be eternally lost. So I had this revelation. And then after that, I moved into the second phase of the experience in which my consciousness began to expand out of my body, and I found myself somewhere up above the universe, looking down on the earth. And this is where, again, it gets hard to describe simply because time was different. So it's like there was these multiple things happening at the same time. So I'm going to describe it one way, and then I'll backtrack and describe it another way so I can try to cover everything that happened. So on the one hand, it was like I was expanding. I realized that I could have any question answered that I wanted answered. And as I was asking questions, I was receiving the answers, and my consciousness continued to expand and expand and expand. So I would ask a question, I would think the question in my mind, and I would receive the answer to that question and how the answer to that question fit together with everything else in the universe. And then it's like I was receiving downloads of information straight into my consciousness. There was no words. It was just like this massive download of information all at once. So I would get this download, my consciousness would expand to accommodate it, and I would suddenly know all of these things, which would stimulate more questions. So I would ask like 5 more questions and get 5 more downloads, and this was all happening so fast. It was I felt like I was expanding at the speed of light. Another way that I can describe this expansion is that I was expanding through dimensional awareness. So we have 3 spatial dimensions here. The first dimension being a line, I believe. Yeah. And then the second dimension being a plane, the third dimension being a cube. And every time you go up in dimensional awareness, there's so much more space that's available to contain information. And so that's what it felt like, except I was expanding up through the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th dimensions. And I don't remember how high I went, but I remember like breaking through this barrier multiple times. And every time I did, the freedom that I felt, I can't describe what that felt like. I felt so free and expansive and like, oh, wow, there's this whole other dimension to me. And within this dimension is contained so much information that we can't fit into our 3-dimensional brains. So it was a very liberating experience. And when I arrived at the top, or the most expanded state that I could be in, I felt like the entire universe was happening within me, and it was all one great awareness. I was this one great awareness that encompassed everything. So now I'll go back and I'll share what the things I remember that I was shown. Most of what I was shown in that state was impossible for me to take back with me. It was like these really complicated mathematical and logical and musical and geometrical formulas that explained why everything the way that it is, and why we have to suffer, and why all of the answers to all of our questions about why everything is the way that it is down here. And from that perspective, it made perfect sense, but it was way too expansive for us to fit into our brains. But there are a couple of things that I do remember. I remember looking down on the earth and seeing that it was made completely of brilliant light. Everything in existence is made of the same brilliant light that I remember from my pre-birth memories. We are all one being, what the Christians call God, and what other people of the world have many different names for: source, universe, creator, whatever word you're comfortable with. It's all one thing. And this one thing is brilliant light and unconditional love. And that's what we're all made of. And I saw that all the earth, like not just in a spiritual dimension, but in the physical dimension, is literally made of this light. Our bodies are made of this light, as well as our souls. And I saw, now keep in mind at the time, I was a Christian teenager that was just living in a lot of guilt and shame and condemnation, and like really empty and desperately seeking for fulfillment. I saw that most of the things that I had been taught in the church were wrong. and that we are all made of this unconditional love that we're seeking, and that it's impossible for us to get away from it even if we tried. And from God's perspective, we're just like toddlers stumbling around learning to walk. And I was told this specifically word for word. I was told, you have nothing to feel guilty for, you have nothing to feel ashamed of, you have nothing to feel afraid of. There's no judgment waiting for you. It's impossible for anyone to be eternally lost. Your life is proceeding exactly as it is supposed to, and we are cheering you on and guiding you every step of the way. And I cannot express how liberating it was in that moment. It was like waking up out of a nightmare and realizing this whole thing was a dream. This whole thing was a play I was acting out. That isn't really me. And I'm not alone. And I didn't make any mistakes in the sense of like, from our perspective, we make mistakes down here, but all of that is accounted for within the greater plan. And I haven't messed anything up. God isn't angry at me. No one's waiting to throw me into hell. Nobody's judging me. I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, mistakes included. So that was one thing I saw. And then the other thing I saw is when I was at the most expanded state, I looked down and I saw this beautiful, multidimensional, colorful pattern. And I was told this is the cosmic master plan of God. And I was shown that there's one great plan that encompasses everything, and it is big enough to encompass all of our mistakes, all of our free will choices. It shifts and it moves around us as we're making choices, and it brings everything back into the center of love. And everything will ultimately one day be reunited with love. That's what I was shown. Another thing that I saw when I got to my most expanded state is I saw the key to life, and I do not remember what that was. I remember laughing and thinking, it's so simple, and we make things so complicated down here. As soon as I saw the key to life, I began contracting back into my body. And I remember feeling like I was floating back into my body on the music of the spheres, which I could hear very clearly. And I also remember feeling like information is losing my consciousness, like going out of my consciousness like a balloon losing air. And then I contracted, contracted, and contracted and came back in. And most of the information that I had seen in that experience faded away, but I still felt that force field of love with me until I fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, that was also gone, but I felt a warm glow around my body for a couple of days, and then eventually that faded away as well.
To watch the full video, click the link below, and I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel.
Resto maliata falia, tan shavralet.